The night it happened was unlike any other. A quiet, humid evening in downtown Chicago, the kind where trouble lurked just beneath the surface. Jamal Bryant, a 32-year-old black man, had just finished his late shift at the warehouse. His body ached, his mind was tired, and all he wanted was to get home, take a quick shower, and collapse onto his bed. He had no idea his life was about to be turned upside down. As he drove through the dimly lit streets, his hands resting lazily on the steering wheel, the sudden glare of red and blue lights filled his rearview mirror. His stomach tightened. He hadn't been speeding, hadn't run a light, hadn't done anything. The patrol car behind him let out a sharp blare of the siren. "Pull over, now!" Jamal swallowed hard and complied, steering his old Honda Civic to the curb. His fingers clenched the wheel. He'd been through this before. A random stop, some nonsense excuse, and then they'd let him go after making him feel like he didn't belong. But the moment Officer Logan Masters stepped out, Jamal knew this was different. Masters was the worst kind of cop, a man who walked with the air of authority, smug in the power he wielded. He had a reputation in the neighborhood, especially among young black men. The stories were always the same. Stops for no reason, illegal searches, a sudden discovery of drugs or weapons that weren't there before. Jamal kept his hands on the wheel as the officer approached, heart hammering. "Step out of the vehicle," Masters ordered, his voice sharp, eyes already filled with something mean and determined. "Did I do something wrong?" Jamal asked, forcing his voice to stay calm. "You match the description of a suspect in an armed robbery." Jamal's blood ran cold. "That's impossible. I just got off work." "Step out." Before he could even react, the door was yanked open and Masters grabbed him. Within seconds, Jamal was slammed against the hood, his cheek scraping against the metal. "What the hell, man? I didn't do anything." Masters pressed a knee into his back as he snapped the cuffs on. A second officer, younger, looking uncomfortable, stood nearby. A minute later, Masters reached into the back seat of Jamal's car, rummaging around. Then, suddenly, he straightened up, holding something in a plastic bag. A gun. Jamal's breath caught. His heart pounded. He had never owned a gun in his life. Masters smirked. Well, look what we have here." Jamal shook his head violently. "That's not mine." "Tell it to the judge." They stuffed him into the back of the police car, ignoring his protests, his disbelief. As they drove toward the station, Masters spoke into his radio. "Suspect in custody. Robbery weapon recovered from his vehicle." They were framing him. At the precinct, the questioning was a joke. "Where were you at 9:15 p.m.? "At work. Ask my boss. There are cameras." "Anyone see you leave?" "Yes!" "My coworkers. Look at the damn time clock. My shift ended at 9:20. "So, you're saying you didn't commit the robbery at 9:30? Jamal stared at them. "That's what I'm saying. It's literally impossible." Masters leaned forward, eyes cold. "We have security footage. The suspect matches your height and build." Jamal felt his stomach drop. "That doesn't mean it's me." "And the gun?" Jamal exhaled sharply. "I told you. It's not mine." It didn't matter. The case against him was already built. A blurry security image. A gun that had somehow appeared in his car. And worst of all, a witness statement from an elderly woman who thought she saw him running from the scene. His court-appointed lawyer barely put up a fight. The judge set bail at $50,000, an amount Jamal and his family could never afford. He sat in jail for 2 weeks, waiting, hoping. Then the DNA results came back. The young officer who had been quiet before walked into the interrogation room holding a folder. He looked nervous. Masters was standing near the wall, arms crossed, smug. "Go ahead. Tell him," he said. The officer hesitated. Then he cleared his throat and read from the report. "The DNA from the weapon doesn't match Mr. Bryant." Silence. Masters' smirk disappeared. The officer continued, voice careful. We ran it twice. The DNA belongs to someone else. Bryant's not our guy." For the first time, Jamal let himself breathe. His chest felt lighter. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't making this up. The evidence proved it. But something was wrong. Masters didn't look frustrated. He didn't look shocked. He just stared. Then slowly, he leaned forward. "Then how'd the gun get in his car?" His voice was too calm. The young officer swallowed hard. "That's what we need to find out." Another silence. Jamal saw it. Masters' fingers twitching near his belt, the way his jaw clenched, the way his eyes flicked toward the cameras in the room. Then the realization hit Jamal all at once. Masters wasn't surprised by the DNA results because he already knew the gun wasn't his. He had planted it, and now he was realizing that someone else knew too. Jamal's mouth went dry. He was still in handcuffs, still locked in a room with this man, and now he wasn't sure if he would make it out. Masters slowly exhaled, eyes darting toward the young officer. Jamal could see the wheels turning in his head. If this went public, if the DNA evidence was released, Masters would be finished. His career, his reputation, maybe even his freedom. Unless... Masters turned to the young officer and smiled thinly. "We should check those DNA results again," he said smoothly. "Could have been a contamination issue. Wouldn't want to let a criminal walk free on a lab error, would we?" The young officer hesitated. For a long, agonizing moment, no one spoke. Then suddenly the door opened, and a high-ranking detective stepped in. He was an older black man, eyes sharp as he scanned the room. "We got a problem?" he asked, his gaze locking onto Masters. Masters' expression flickered. He took a step back. Jamal's pulse raced. This was it. Either he was walking out of here, or he wasn't walking out at all. The moment the detective stepped in, the air in the interrogation room changed. He was older, a man with a presence that demanded respect. He glanced at Jamal, still handcuffed, then at Masters, whose face had tightened just enough for someone paying attention to notice. Jamal could feel it. This was his one shot at getting out of this alive. "We got a problem?" the detective asked, his voice even but firm. Masters hesitated for a fraction of a second before shaking his head. "Not at all. Just clearing up some inconsistencies." "Inconsistencies? Like how this man's DNA isn't on the weapon you charged him with?" The young officer standing near the wall shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I was just saying—" "I heard you," the detective said, cutting him off. His eyes stayed locked on Masters. "The lab ran it twice. The DNA isn't his. That means someone else used that gun. So why is this man still in cuffs?" Masters' jaw tightened. "Because he was caught with the weapon in his car." The detective took a step forward. "And how exactly did it get there?" Silence. Jamal's breathing slowed. He knew what was happening. The detective knew. The younger officer probably knew. Hell, maybe even the whole department knew what Masters was capable of. The only question was, what were they going to do about it? The detective exhaled through his nose. "Take the cuffs off him." Masters didn't move. Jamal felt his stomach twist. The detective's voice hardened. "I said, take the cuffs off." A long second passed. Then, reluctantly, Masters pulled out the key and unlocked them. The cuffs clattered onto the table. Jamal flexed his wrists, swallowing back the anger threatening to explode out of him. The detective turned to the young officer. "Escort Mr. Bryant out of here, now." The officer hesitated, but then gave a quick nod. "Yes, sir." Jamal stood slowly, his body tense. He didn't trust this, not yet. But he followed the young officer out of the room, feeling Masters' eyes burning into his back. The station was buzzing with activity, but to Jamal it all felt distant. His mind was spinning, trying to piece everything together. They tried to frame him. They nearly got away with it. And now he was walking out. But not because the system worked. Because someone high enough up realized this was about to become a problem. As he reached the front desk, the officer guiding him cleared his throat. "Listen, man, I don't know what's going on, but you need to get a lawyer, a real one." Jamal gave a dry laugh. "You think I got lawyer money?" The officer looked down, uncomfortable. "Just be careful." Jamal nodded, but didn't say another word as he stepped out of the precinct. The air outside hit him like a wave, cool, fresh, free. But the moment he turned the corner, that feeling vanished. A black SUV was parked across the street. Tinted windows, engine running, watching. His stomach clenched. He didn't wait around. He took off toward the train station, walking fast but not running. Running would make him look guilty. Running would make them come after him. By the time he reached the station, he checked his phone. Dozens of missed calls from his mother, his brother, his cousin. He hadn't been able to call anyone from inside. They'd probably thought he was already gone. He needed to get out of sight. He needed a plan. But before he could do anything, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Now check your left." His blood turned to ice. Slowly, he turned his head. A woman in a dark hoodie sat 3 seats away on the train bench, her face shadowed. She didn't look at him, just kept her eyes on her phone. Jamal's heart pounded. He had no idea who she was, but she knew him, and she had been waiting. He exhaled. "Who the hell are you?" The woman finally turned, her gaze sharp. "Someone who knows the truth about masters." Jamal tensed. "What truth?" She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "He's done this before. And the last guy didn't make it out." A chill ran down Jamal's spine. The train rumbled in the distance. Jamal exhaled, every nerve in his body screaming at him to walk away. But he couldn't. Not yet. He clenched his fists. "Tell me everything." The woman nodded. "Let's move." They disappeared into the crowd, the black SUV still watching from the distance. But this time, Jamal wasn't running. He was going to fight back, and he was going to take Masters down.